For someone who hated color pencils, found art class very painful, and believed that she's not gifted with talent despite having artist parents, Lane took a different route and eventually found herself trying different things while keeping creativity at bay. Lane Teo broke out of the mold and learned her way into watercolor painting through curiosity, shift in mindset, and consistency. In this episode, Lane shares about taking inspiration from your desire to travel, allowing yourself to be creative regardless of the circumstances, transporting your audience to a magical place through your works, reflecting your mood, emotions, and personality in your art, how to tell stories using colors, and tips and key tricks to achieve composition and perspective. If you want to be part of the conversation, then send in your questions and topics you want us to cover to hello@etcherlab.com. Hey, this is Jessie from Etcher. We believe in your power to create, so we invited artists from all around the globe to inspire you to keep on creating. Join us in this journey and let's celebrate creativity. This is Make More Art, the podcast. Just take us through how you started. Have you always been creative and artistic as a kid, or did you study it back in school? How did you choose watercolor? Have you tried other mediums? Just take us through the journey. Share us your artist journey, basically.
Actually, it's quite a strange journey
Mm-hmm.
because I started not really having much talent at all.
Really?
So yeah, really, I hated color pencils. I hated art class. It
Oh.
was really quite painful for me. Yeah. And my mom, on the other hand, she was quite an artist. She loved acrylics. She could paint on clay, and she would like paint on like wood, because my father is like a designer and he's carpenter as well. So I came from very artistic parents, but I did not feel like I had much abilities. So as I went along, I actually had a great love of makeup. So I actually did take courses on that, all while studying business.
Okay.
So I was actually for school,
Mhm.
I was hardcore business. I was business grad. I had a whole idea that I was just going to do business. So
Okay.
I joined the family business. It was always marketing. Marketing was my most favorite subject of them all. And I guess there was some creativity there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I was always interested in the design, in the how things are portrayed. And I love to take like behind the scenes of like what was going on in the factory, because a lot of it was actually centered around design. I just I was not aware of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess my journey actually really started when my son started to draw,
Okay.
because my eldest son is 12 now,
Okay.
and he started to draw when he was about 6.
Wow.
So yeah, so he would do these random doodles, and actually I would take them and I would just paint with the koi box, those koi watercolors. Yeah.
Yes.
So I would buy it from Popular, and I'll just fill out his
Popular.
doodles. Yeah. Yeah. So it was actually really a really random, a really fun experience for me getting into watercolor. Yeah. It was never something serious. And what happened was that the pandemic came around.
Okay.
And that was a really shocking time for all of us, because everyone was trapped indoors. So I think I needed a stress outlet. And honestly, the only thing that I could think of was, okay, I'm gonna paint something that my son drew. And I started to draw random things like, stuff I would see on Instagram, like, a European home,
Oh.
the street in Europe. Yeah. And it was all, I would say it was quite terrible. So it wasn't something really artistic at that point in time. I was just trying to, unwind, maybe de-stress.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I happened to upload one of these paintings onto my Instagram page back then, and a friend bought it off me. So it was actually quite surprising.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, but I didn't think much of it then.
Okay.
So I just went along, using the koi watercolor box, and somehow I don't know what really led me to the journey of using gouache and everything else, but yeah, it kind of developed from there actually. So it was a very accidental journey into watercolor. It was more like I needed an outlet from COVID and from work. Yeah, and I had a bit more time during COVID because we were all locked at home.
Yes.
So I think it was just everything just came together, and yeah.
Thanks you.
So
Thanks,
that was
Ling.
how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly, your parents are both artists, I would say, but you said that you
Right.
kind of veered away from that and you focus more on business and business. But there is this, like what you said, design is always part of it because for marketing, you have to be creative, right? So it's
Yeah.
always been there. It's just probably waiting for that opportune time to be unlocked. And that's exactly what happened when pandemic hits for you, at least. Well, like what I said, we were talking offline, I was based in Singapore as well. I knew exactly how you felt when you were in lockdown, we couldn't get out. So you have to find a way to do something indoors. And for you, it's
Yeah.
watercolor.
Yeah. Strange
Watercolor.
enough.
And you
Yeah.
said that you started painting European homes. That was a huge
Yeah.
jump, I would say.
It's actually because I stayed in Europe for when I was 21.
Okay.
I traveled overseas with my husband.
Mhm.
So I got married pretty young, and we stayed overseas in Europe for 1 year when he was working there.
Yeah.
And that was all I was exposed to. I mean, I had Europe for an entire year.
Mhm.
So it was so strange because we were planning to take a trip back during the COVID year. So I guess a part of me, my subconscious brain, probably wanted to travel back more than you.
And it translates to your painting. Okay.
Yeah, so it actually came out through a painting. But if you ask me, I wasn't really very aware of what I was doing.
Okay.
I just knew that I needed an outlet to de-stress, unwind.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that it just came about naturally, I guess.
Okay. So from European home, because when I was looking at your feed and I was trying to see all of your paintings, and in your bio, the tagline is magical landscape artist. And
Yeah.
I have to say that it is indeed magical. The way that you use pastel colors and light in your landscapes, it's just whimsical, magical for me when I look at it. So when did it start, Lane? How did you ventured into landscape? So from European homes, because normally when I ask people who do watercolor, right, they would say, "Oh, I started with florals," because the florals would probably be the easiest, or leaves maybe. But you chose landscape. What is the influence, or what led you to be inspired to make watercolor landscapes, the magical ones? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually that was very, very accidental as well. So
Okay.
I was actually doing florals, and I was doing quite
Oh,
a bit of the leaves.
okay.
But because I was doing quite a lot of outdoor stuff. That was the only thing we were allowed to do, basically.
Yes.
Visit parks, take walks.
True.
So we were always in nature, right? And I was doing quite a bit. I had a bit of burnout from work. So I was really attracted to nature. And from there, I would paint. I still have my booklet. I have all my journals where I paint. And I would look through them because I filled up an entire one with like my trips outdoors.
Okay.
And I just thought, like, maybe I should try something different after that one book full of florals. And I somehow saw this beautiful photo on Instagram as well
Okay.
of a landscape. And I thought to myself, it was of a barn. It was of a barn, I think in the snowy barn. And I was like, yeah, that's where I want to be. So I decided, okay, I'm going to paint that. Yeah. So everything that came out of me was probably something I really wanted in my subconscious mind, but I couldn't get it, I wanted it in my mind as well, but there was no way we could go there or travel there for the moment. Yeah. So I think a lot of it came out from Wanderlust.
Yeah. I like that, Lane, because it appears that everything that you have been painting is sort of like what you had subconsciously. You were thinking about it, like the European home. You lived in Europe for a while, and we couldn't travel, so it's a sort of, okay, I want to go to Europe, and then it translated to your painting, and now landscapes as well. Because I saw like winter trees, and then you have like landscapes, and then pastel colors, things or sceneries that you can see when you travel. Because
Yeah.
Lane and I were talking offline, by the way, and we're both, I came from Singapore, she is in Singapore. So we're kind of talking about how, we're both from tropical countries. But when you
Yeah.
look at your paintings, it's from all over, like from different places. So
Yeah, I guess my mind is traveling everywhere every day because I when I was young, I used to love anime. Anime was
and
everything to me
oh,
before kids, before
yeah.
kids take up all your time and everything. So I loved watching anime. It was my thing. So I would watch Naruto, everything from Naruto to the weirdest animes
Wow.
back when we had the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I didn't know it, but somehow I always love color. So it's like a makeup palette, right? It has so many different colors. Yeah, nothing looks good on the eye, like from green to blue. But I just knew that somehow I had a very intense love of colors.
Colors.
Yeah, and it wasn't very apparent to me until I started my watercolor journey, which is really strange because I discovered more about myself during this coloring and painting journey than anything else. So it was strange because I don't like to draw. And I have a funny story about this as well because being in a family business of interior design, right? I had to take a perspective class when I first started.
Yeah.
So I really hated it. Once again, I don't think I learn in a very orthodox manner. I'm not the kind of a person who can go to class and just pick up a technical skill. I have to do it. So I'm more of a doer. And I found that when I was into my 5th year into my family business, right, I was painting a lot of children's beds. So I had a kids line, I had a kids furniture line. I would draw furniture for children on the daily. And I think that's what helped me a lot with my perspective sketch. Because as I said, I was really rubbish at it. So honestly, it was my brother who was very talented. My brother was very talented at perspective sketching. I could draw a dinosaur. I roughly knew how to draw things just by looking at them. But in terms of perspective sketching, I found it so difficult because it's a really difficult skill to pick up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think I was really focused somehow on the product design. And without knowing, 5 years went by and I was doing this daily. I don't think I was very good, but I think that I was actually slowly picking up new skills or like picking up, okay, this doesn't look too good, I'll change it. I would actually do it like that. So I was actually teaching myself. I was learning how I learn. And I found that I learned the best through practice. I had to teach myself. I had to relook at things and, so I think we all learn quite differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but actually I found that my journey was more like, my painting journey is actually also a self-discovery in many, many ways. Yeah, I was discovering how to do perspective sketch. I was discovering my love of colors. I was discovering my need to travel so badly, during this COVID time. Yeah, because before that, it was always a given. Every year we would travel. Yeah. So I think it was everything was just coming together at that point in my life. Yeah.
I really love the points that you shared, Lane. First off, you love makeup and makeup all colors, but unknowingly, right? It's already there. You're being exposed to colors and mixes and blending of colors. Of course, when you do makeups, right? And then taking over your family business, which will require you to do perspective. So it's like everything is coming full circle up until this point, up until that point of the pandemic, when the pandemic hits, and then you stumbled upon watercolor. So everything that has happened from you learning makeup and then the 5 years into the family business and then creating children's furnitures sort of came together when you picked up watercolor. And then of course you tried gouache. It's just a very interesting story because a lot of people sometimes when they think of art, right, that you have to have you have to be really talented in order to paint, that it has to be something that's innate in you when you're born. But no, it's like what you said, unorthodox, the way that you learn all of these things. The exposure is there, and you have there are opportunities and avenues for you to practice, but everything came full circle when you picked up watercolor. So I was really about to ask, what you mentioned, that it's a self-discovery for you, and that's really something that I think our audience would definitely pick up, because when you immerse yourself into art, definitely you will discover a lot about yourself. And probably have the similar story with you. I wasn't really good at painting or anything like that when I was young, but it's just very inspiring to hear you talk about it. And now you're also teaching with Etcher. So going back quickly to landscapes, Lane. So it's magical. And I know these are influences of your travels, the desire to travel, wanderlust, like what you said. But I would like to better understand the word magical in your landscape. Take us through, why did you refer to them? What is it about your landscape that makes it magical in that sense?
Wow. uh, I feel like because I'm not very technical in my painting style, so yeah, and the things that I like, the colors that I like aren't really realistic sometimes. They're always geared towards some sort of anime theme, Ghibli theme, and something that I just like because I love pastels.
Yeah.
So yeah, because of the fact that they don't represent 100% of reality, you know, they're more of like the colors I like. I may see a reference photo where I like the landscape, but I don't like the colors. So I'll change that up. Yeah. Or I feel like the landscape should have more stars in it, or it should have more clouds in it. And then I'll just add it in. Yeah. So as I'm going along in my journey, I'm learning too, because I feel like I'm adding in things that I like. Whereas when I started, I would just draw and paint what I saw. So yeah, and I never expected to be an artist, so-called. I still don't feel really comfortable calling myself that, because I feel like it's a journey of self-discovery. And I feel like my art reflects my moods, how I think, what's in my brain. And I don't really tell really good stories when I write. So that's what I've always known when I was young. I don't really like to write. I find it quite a chore. I'm a visual learner. And so I feel like somehow painting is a way for me to express myself. And I like it when people comment like, oh, you know, that looks like really happy place, or that looks like you were in a gloomy state. You know, that sometimes my friends tell me that. So I really like that feedback, and people can really tell what I'm thinking, like looking at my paintings. I think that's magical. I don't have to write it out.
Yes.
I just have to paint it, and somehow I can express myself. Yeah. So I guess in that sense, that's magic to me.
Make More Art, the podcast, is made possible by listeners like you. So we would like to give a shout out to AB from YouTube on a recent episode with Max McKee. He said, "Very interesting interview. Max's approach is very inspiring. Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show." It is indeed. And I think you perfectly captured, because there's another question that I was about to ask. Normally, I ask this question at the latter part of the interview, and that is the question of what is art for you? But the way that you explain how your art influence other people when they look at it, like the emotion that it evokes when they look at it, like what you said, it's a representation of how you feel, and your color choices, the way you visualize things, like adding in stars, changing the colors and turning it into pastel, not very realistic, but it is magical. And when people look at it, it's really good to hear when comments or read feedback saying that it's such a happy place. When you look at your painting, it's such a happy place, or that you are able to express yourself through it without writing anything. And that is indeed magical. And I guess if I were to ask you what art is, you just perfectly describe it with the way that you shared about how you create your paintings, even your color choices.
Thank you.
Now, I would like to ask you, Lane, about, because you talk about perspective earlier, and I know you hated it, but when you look at your works, the composition and the perspective, would you take us through how you create those? Any tips and pieces of advice that you can share? Because I personally, that's something that I struggle with. Like when I look at something, I don't know how to position it. Like if I look at it, how am I going to translate that into painting in the way that it would look as if it's okay, this is positioned here, the one at the ladder at the back, or how do I place the different objects within the painting? So any tips and tricks that you can share with us, Lane, in terms of composition and perspective?
Okay, I think just to make it really easy,
Mhm.
I always look at it in threes. So for me, without thinking, I actually split my paper up into threes, either horizontally or vertically, depending on the painting.
Mhm.
And I always plot the biggest items, the biggest features first. So whatever I see, I actually put them down on paper.
Mhm.
So I know people usually use the vanishing point, right? But
Yeah.
for me, I don't really go there because it's not how I do
Mhm.
my perspective sketching.
Mhm.
Yeah. I basically put down all the different features or the main features that I see.
Yeah.
And I actually look at it once I'm done plotting it out. I actually look at it from afar and I take a look at it and see if it makes sense. Of course, proportionally,
Yeah.
I have to know, yeah, when I guess there's a bit of calculation that goes on in the brain,
Mhm.
like, it has to make sense. So yeah, when we take perspective class, that was the one thing I took from it, is that everything has to be in proportion.
Okay.
So you don't have to calculate it, but I think when you look at it, you can actually tell, okay, this is going to be one third of the diagonal line, or this is going to take up 2/3 of a certain space. And when that's how actually I translate it. I don't really think about it, but if you ask me to jot down my thought process when I'm painting, that's how I do it. So main features, and I watch the proportion, and then I look at it from afar and I see if it makes sense. Yeah. And
Really
normally I can tell within, just before I put down the paint, if it's all right. If it's not, I just take eraser and I just erase it and just start from the, yeah. Don't
Okay.
be afraid to, yeah. So I don't think I'm really perfect yet at perspective sketching, because it's always it's a continual journey. Sometimes I don't quite get it right too,
Mhm.
but I feel like when you paint, you can actually work your way around the imperfections. Yeah.
I love that when you pointed out that do not be afraid to make mistakes and you can
Yeah,
just
it's fine.
erase and start over. But also the points that you make about perspective, I think those would be good trinkets of wisdom and tips from you, Lane, because I I don't think I'm the only one who struggle with it. A lot of people who are starting out, it's always a question of where do I place things, or
Oh,
what's the proportion? I always struggle with proportion. So is this something that you also going to be expounding on when you do your live demo and mini workshop?
yeah, definitely, because I think this is something that like when I'm painting, I don't think too much about. But
Mhm.
when I do think about my own struggles, when I went for that first design class, I realized that perspective sketching is actually a really difficult subject. And I actually have quite a few art teacher friends who I've spoken to about this topic, and they told me that it actually takes years to even get good, even get some sort of a real good grasp on it from a student's perspective.
Yeah.
And I thought, I guess I was thinking of ways to actually break it down and make it easier for the layman. Because for me, it took really a long time. I don't feel like I'm perfect at it, but yeah, just to understand it, I had to go. My tip, one of my best tip would be to practice every day on a small object. So
Mm,
don't take a big landscape first.
okay.
Like focus maybe on something that you really like florals, or leaf, a tree. I love trees. I love to draw a tree. So
Mhm.
I think that really helps. Or draw a house. Just draw something simple. Yeah. And if you do it daily, you can actually see the little bits of improvements that come with daily practice. Yeah. So for me, I would say that it took me 5 years to finally get some sort of grasp on what perspective sketch is about, because it really is not easy
Yeah.
to yeah.
I'm sure
So
that
there's no short answer to it.
short answer to it.
Yeah, I don't know too, actually, but what I found worked for me was doing those small furniture item designs, and
Mm,
then working on a big bigger furniture piece, like going into a kitchen. So before you go into a kitchen, you go and you actually try to sketch out small items first. And that's where I think that's how you get successful at something. You start small and you work your way up. Yeah.
I like that, Lane. And I think it stems from the unorthodox way of learning, like what you said. And it varies really. And I'm glad that you are teaching with us because people have different ways of learning. And I'm sure when,
I agree. Yeah. My brother, so he went for the class with me, and immediately within a few sessions, he picked up the proportion, the perspective, and honestly, he's not a painter. He's not a sketcher by any chance. He doesn't like to take out a pencil and paint, so he's really good at SketchUp. And he really got all the proportion, the perspective, just using a ruler and pencil.
Yeah.
So and that's when I thought to myself, actually everyone learns so differently. I want to share. I mean, if there's a chance, I would like to share with others how I learn, because I feel like a lot of people are like me. They don't want to take a technical class on how to sketch a beautiful landscape, you know, because that would take up too much time actually. So you just need to maybe know a bit of shortcuts, practice, and yeah. But I feel like you're right, Jessie. Not everyone can pick up a pencil and understand perspective sketch immediately. It needs time and practice. Yeah.
Thanks, Lane. It's really good to highlight that it needs time because, of course, I think we've touched on this previously in the past episodes in this podcast, that it really takes time. And what you see like on YouTube when people are like sketching or painting and then in time lapse, and immediately you have this beautiful landscape painting. It's not realistic.
It's a really unrealistic representation of how people learn, of how people get things. Because if I was in the design line, I had to produce designs, you know, for work. However, my designs were quite restricted because I knew what my customers wanted. So in terms of color, in terms of design, in terms of layout, I was always restricted to, I had some restrictions to work around. So I guess there lay some limitations to what I could produce and draw. Yeah. But for the layman who doesn't practice it every day, I guess that's when maybe YouTube tutorials, you know, even sometimes I watch reels on Instagram.
Agree.
Just to get by, just to see how other artists paint, because I realize everyone doesn't paint the same.
Yes.
So how I do my perspective sketching is not how someone else does it. So I think that the what goes on behind the thought process of it is the most interesting part. Yeah.
And that's what it's gonna be. That's what makes your live demo interesting, because you have a very unorthodox way of learning. You learn this perspective and so different from like the usual way of learning perspective. And I'm sure you people who will be watching your live and your who will be joining you for your mini workshop will definitely learn a lot from you, Lane. So I'm sure they will. Okay, you mentioned about self-discovery, and we're nearing the end of the episode, but I would just want to capture that and hear from you. What have you learned so far in this journey? Because it's quite short, right? From the time that you started watercolor, and
it's really short.
And you've also touched on gouache. Is this within the time that when the pandemic hits that you also tried gouache, or was it prior watercolor?
I definitely started watercolor first.
Okay.
So I started with the koi box first.
Yeah.
And and as I went along, I found that sometimes watercolor didn't give me the intensity that I needed.
Yeah.
Like my whites and, you know, for my blues and for my greens. And I found that I needed a paint that could give me that kind of vibrancy and intensity of color. Yeah. So when I found gouache, it was through the Hime gouache. I think that was really popular.
Hime,
it was affordable. It's still affordable, and it's really fun to use. It's super cute too. It comes in a nice box, which I love because I have no more space on my table. So yeah, it's really compact. I like the fact that you can just open it up. Everything is in a palette. It's just like a makeup palette. That's what I love about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But
Yeah.
talking about this journey of yours,
Yeah.
Lane, what will be your biggest takeaway? Like learning and navigating through landscapes using watercolor. And now that you have an opportunity to teach what you know, what you have learned, what would you say would be your biggest takeaway from that experience?
I think my biggest takeaway is you're never just keep learning. Just keep learning and be consistent with what you're learning. It's just like me. I was really bad at perspective sketching.
Mhm.
I would say my teacher had really little faith in me. And in turn, I actually did not want to sketch because I didn't have the confidence in myself. And I was quite turned off learning about design and actually about trying to paint, trying to sketch. Yeah. That's why I love painting, because I feel like no one can tell you that it's right. And the limitations are your own. So basically you can use your own colors and everything. But going back to the point about practicing and everything, you have to be consistent with it. So I find that if you're learning something, you can learn something new every week. You don't have to learn something new every day. Like you can learn like, okay, something new about perspective twice a month. But as long as you practice it, maybe once a week even, you just get better and better without even knowing. That's what I found. So the consistency for me has always been the key. It's not about doing it every day till I burn out, but it's more about applying what I've learned and doing it consistently. Even when I'm tired, I paint. Or when I feel like there's too many things going on, I try to make time for it. Yeah. Because I won't get better at anything if I'm not consistent with my efforts. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not a natural born painter, but I was really happy when my friends told me that they felt inspired to paint or to get back into painting because it's like therapy. So for me, it's very inspiring because I did not aspire to be an artist when I was young. It was never something that I was really focused on. I just stumbled across it, and when I did, it was like therapy to me. It was really relaxing. It was a way for me to escape all the COVID, and it was such a good way to get out of my own head. And I also have a little bit of a attention deficit. So when I do something, my brain is in a million places. But I found that when I paint, I can actually focus. So I think that to me is something really special. I think everyone finds something that really takes them out of their head and makes them focus on what they're doing. And to be consistent at it isn't really very common, something really common for me. It's like, and the common thread lying through makeup, because I still love makeup, but I just don't use it as much. But the common thread running through all this is my love of colors and the fact that for me, painting is a safe space for me. Yeah. You can make mistakes, you can erase it off, you can paint over it, and it's fine. Yeah. So I love the fact that it's so forgiving, and there's always room for improvement. You don't have to be a certain age to learn, to paint. It is just something that if you feel good about it, you can do it, Yeah.
Nicely said, beautifully said, Lane. And I think, well, the title of this podcast is Make More Art. And I believe, inspired a lot of people to get started, whether watercolor or gouache, but just get started, wherever you are, whatever age you may be. It's never too late to get started and learn something. And yes, like what you said, it's very therapeutic and
It is.
an escape. If you're stuck and you can't go anywhere, look back at your travel photos and like do what Lane did, paint your travel destination, or the previous places that you've been, because it's also one way to capture the experience, right? When you translate it into your painting. Lane, I had so much fun, and just speaking to you, I make me miss Singapore more. um,
Oh,
when
come
you
back
talk about popular,
over.
like going to the parks and taking a walk. I miss the city. But thank you for chatting with me. I had so much fun and I learned so much. I'm excited for your live demo, and you sharing the unorthodox way of learning watercolor and painting magical landscape. I'm sure a lot of people will get trinkets of golden nuggets from you, especially on perspective. So
Yeah, you don't have to take a master class in perspective sketching. You can be just like me, a normal everyday person that just some tips and tricks and some consistent practice, and I'm sure anyone can get there. Yeah.
sure they will with your help. Thank you so much, Lane, for
Thank you.
being on Make More Art, the podcast, and we'll catch up with you again, especially on your live demo. Thanks,
Thanks,
Lane.
Jessie.
All right.
Thanks.
Lane's story isn't your typical artist journey, yet all of her previous experiences mixed with her innermost desire created opportunities for her to embrace art and creativity. What about you? What recent self-discoveries have you had while making art? Do let us know by sharing your comments through the blog post associated with this podcast at etrolab.com/lane. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please drop us a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast, or you can find us on YouTube at Etro Studio. And hitting the subscribe button is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you again next time. Until then, let's make more art.